Good afternoon and welcome to this afternoon's session on mastering green skills. So this, I think, is going to be the best session of the entire day because what we're talking about is not only the future of our planet, but the future generations who are going to drive the solutions for our planet. So thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm very keen for this to be interactive. So start thinking about your questions from the outset and we'll have someone with a roving mic coming around to ask you for your input. So before we start, some introductions. I'm delighted to be joined by such an expert, eminent and diverse panel covering skills, initiatives, innovative approaches, new insights and cross-sector collaborations. So I'm going to ask you each to just introduce yourself, where you come from and how you would define green skills. Let's start at that end.
Thanks, Flora. So thanks for being here. It's great to be here. My name is Troy Armour and I am the CEO and founder of a platform called Kouture. Kouture started 16 years ago and the kind of concept behind it is to create a sport where I mix two things together, creativity and circularity. Both of those things came out of me as a kid. So as a kid, I was awful at sports. I was that kid, last pick for every football team, which meant I wasn't cool. In fact, I was the complete opposite. And that was something I really struggled with as a young person. And then the other thing was I grew up in Ireland in the 70s and 80s, and the word sustainability or circularity didn't exist because we were already naturally sustainable and circular. The things that came into our homes got reused. As a young creative person, I reused trash to make things. So Kouture was born out of those two things. It was a sport that celebrated the kids that stood out. I was born to stand out. As a kid, that's very difficult. Number two, it allowed young people to create circularly, which for me is the ultimate goal in leading young people to a more sustainable future.
It's fantastic. And if you have a phone, literally just Google Kouture now. It is so inspiring seeing these young people creating the most incredible outfits out of the widest array of, recycled things, including someone who'd turned their school blinds into the most incredible couture dress.
The challenge is you have to create fashion from trash. And at this point, it's kind of crazy, like for me, because I have a tech company, but it started as a hobby, but it now has reached 74 different countries and has a World Cup. And, when I go back to just a simple story of this young girl who decided to make a dress out of orange skin and that rotted 4 times. And then this is the difference between adults and kids. Her father's there going, that is not going to work. You need to stop. This is not going to work. It's green after a week. That young girl managed to make leather out of the oranges, and it's just that competitiveness, that also this challenge to do something, and then it's bringing that forward into their lives. So the panel before had a lot of the luxury brands. The ultimate for me is that these young people will go out into the world as circular engineers, circular fashionistas, and bring circularity kind of into these fashion houses and into other companies kind of from the ground up as they go.
Yeah. And yes, it really is so exciting.
And it's a lot of fun.
William, then, a different angle. Could you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. First, though, Troy, can I touch your shoe? And I just got to touch this shoe. If you haven't seen this shoe,
they are incredible.
Can I look at this shoe? By the time I leave this stage, I'm going to have this shoe, okay? And you can have my shoes. So, oh my gosh,
thanks, Bill.
So, I remember when I was 12 years old, we had a substitute teacher. So this is 1970. Any teachers here? Teachers. Come on, give it up, teachers. Oh, I know there's more. Okay, slowly. Yeah, even Flora's right, a teacher. So I'm 12 years old, 1970, the year of the first Earth Day in the United States, yep. The year that a Republican president signed the Clean Air Act in the United States. Just saying. Okay. And the substitute teacher comes in, and I don't know if you remember substitute teachers, but the best thing is they come in, and now you can goof off. Right?
I remember that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, you're So he comes out. I don't remember the guy's name. Young kid, young guy out of teacher college, and he's got a pile of papers which are clearly the assignments he's going to give us. And he puts them down, and he looks at us, and he says, "No, I'm not going to do this." And he gets out a piece of chalk. Now, do I have to explain chalk? Okay, because I teach freshmen at Stanford now, and I have to explain chalk. So it's just saying. But so he gets out chalk, which has the great quality that you can draw the earth, and then you can use the side of the chalk to make the atmosphere. And he explains what at that time we referred to as the greenhouse effect. Now, he gets done with this, and the bell rings. And all the kids run outside to play, but I stayed at my desk. And, of course, you got your little name tent, right, because it's substitute teacher. So he comes up, and he says, and he looked very concerned. That's all I remember. He looked very concerned. Now we would call it climate anxiety, right? You want to teach sustainability without freaking the kid out. So he comes up, and he says, Billy, why don't you go out and play? And I remember the only thing I said at that point, I said, this seems like it's really important. You think about it, when you're 12 years old, all the other stuff you get told, you're wondering, why should I care about y equals mx plus b and all this other stuff? This seemed important. So he says, oh, it is, but you won't have to worry about this for a long time, not until you're really old. So here I am, working on it now, right? Yeah, all these years. So I'm a professor at the Stanford Graduate School of Business, and I'm also a professor at the Stanford Doerr School of Sustainability, where I'm the chair of our Department of Environmental Social Sciences. My colleagues and I, over the last few years, created the Doerr School, and we also created that department and a bunch of new courses. And so I can't wait to talk with everybody. Let's hand it over to Mazi Saraparvar.
Great.
Thanks.
It's really hard to top these two guys, Very
It's not a competition. It's
I know, but wonderful. So my name is Mazi Saraparvar, and I came up to sustainability through greed and money. I started at Chicago Business School, went into finance at Morgan Stanley, and then one of my clients, who is really the biggest private land developer in Korea, went bankrupt, and I decided to quit my job and go pursue one of his 13 projects. And so I organized, this is just one of those weird fevers you sometimes get in life. You wake up from it 8 years later and you go, what just happened? So I organized 380 Korean farmers, real old landowners, whose land was about to be taken away by the government. And I had this idea that the way Koreans were building residential was not really a nice way to live. And so with the help of the Princess Foundation, at the time it was called the Princess Foundation for Building Community, and this architect from Denmark called Jan Gehl, we kind of designed a new community. And it's kind of neat because you can go to Korea and see it. And it's a much more sustainable, mixed-use urban development, natural, et cetera, et cetera. So I backed into sustainability that way. And since I went to Oxford to learn how to do sustainable urban development after my MBA, and while I was working, and now I do a lot of special projects at Oxford. So I run a workshop on sustainable finance every year, part of a commission on sustainability data. And I'm so fortunate because actually this gentleman here is one of my great mentors. It is actually hard to be sitting next to him here today, but we've been doing this wonderful program on change making that Bill founded. This is so.
Can you read it to them so they know what it actually says?
It says, "Make Stanford great again." So it's actually make science great again. So I was walking to the bar over on the other side over there, and this Swedish gentleman opened a door for me, and I said, "Oh wow, thank you." And then we got to chatting, and he gave me this hat, and it's perfect for this session because he's pointed out the fact that it's really not a technical problem, but a socio-technical problem we're dealing with, right? I mean, if I asked all you guys, do we have the technology right now to fix the climate crisis, or are we about to have it? I personally think we already do. So why haven't we done it? So I think that's part of what I want to share with you today as we talk about preparing for the jobs of the future. What are the missing skills, particularly that the engineers need? But anyway.
And it sounds like mindsets as well as skills. I'd be quite interested in your perspectives and a bit about, as educators, what are the talents and skills and mindsets you're seeing coming through? Sonia, after you.
I'm the sustainability lead at CFA Institute. CFA Charter is the gold standard in the investment industry, as is well known. But our members have been telling us that they need to constantly upskill themselves in a rapidly changing world. And that's how we now we provide them these learning offerings in sustainability in private markets. So we have 2 certificates, Sustainable Investing Certificate and Climate Risk Valuation and Investing Certificate, to help our members and other practitioners build their skills in this space. And having been a practitioner myself for many years in the past, I really feel grateful for this opportunity to be able to help other practitioners build their skills now.
Thank you, Sonia. And Richard?
My name's Richard. I am an undergraduate at UC Berkeley, so quite a different background from all of you all. And also Go Bears. I know we have some UC Berkeley alumni here, and it's yes. Let's go. And then we have, it's such an honor to share this stage with also, because Junk Kouture was like such a fond memory from middle school for me. And I really loved that experience. So it's, again, I'm so happy just to be here at all. And so the main thing I work on, I guess, that is relevant is my student organization. I lead this organization called the Association for Socially Responsible Business, and probably on the name cards there. No longer, but we work with companies and local nonprofits to staff students on real world projects. We worked with food banks, we worked with local companies and also larger ones, because at UC Berkeley, in terms of undergrads, it's pretty hard to get experience outside of theoretical classroom concepts. And so I guess we kind of help bridge that. And so, my climate journey really started. It's gonna be very different from you all. I think I have a pretty different experience just because of my age bracket. But I really started being interested in sustainability after teachers asked me to watch or showed us Greta Thunberg's speech at the UN General Assembly. And that was where it all started. So just a preface, I guess.
Yeah, and amazing to have on the panel you as the student who's really leading the change. And I love the flip model of you doing the work for the big companies because you are the students with the expertise. And it's absolutely fascinating. Rich, maybe starting with you. So I think it's something you wrote or mentioned that sustainability is sometimes framed as compliance, sacrifice, this slightly dull energy. There's a lot of energy on this panel. How should we reframe it as innovation and opportunity, and how are you doing that on campus?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, I don't think I necessarily have a panacea for that. I'm just a student, but I think to describe the problem really, I think I would want to frame it in terms of how a lot of young people have started to become engaged with sustainability and the environment in general. I know that me personally and a lot of my friends who are passionate about the same subject kind of came at it from a standpoint of climate activism. Greta Thunberg's whole thesis, I guess, was that it is time to act, it's time to regulate, and it's time to put into effect laws and policies that would restrict emissions and pollution and bad things for the environment to make the world a better place. And so that's kind of different from how I guess this whole event is kind of framing it. I guess in terms of you can have profit and progress. Compliance is obviously they're diminishing the company's profits. So I feel there's a lot of it's pretty deep seated, or at least very deeply rooted, the idea of students the idea of like activism and regulation being very intertwined, and students kind of the most passionate people I know at UC Berkeley who care about the environment are people who care about climate activism and not necessarily in that corporate profit-driven setting. So I would, I guess, defer to you all if you have any answers on the specific part about answering to this like events like thesis about like, you know, bridging profits and regulation and sort of making that transition.
And then the three of you there who all work with young people, obviously in different capacities, and see what their young people are capable of. Where are you seeing causes for hope and inspiration in the young people that you're either educating or working with in Junkature? And where do you think actually there's still further to go?
For me, so like I'm right at the coalface, right? And the thing for me is, and I said this earlier, you know, so as a kid I stood out, right? And a lot of creative people do. And that as a kid is very difficult. So Junkature really allows them to do that. And so I get the best of these people who before felt not valued. And so the thing for me that I see the world as this incredible place, right? You know, we just had a world final last week. There was 19 different countries there and 200 kids from, I remember these 3 12-year-olds from India, right? And I interviewed them as a little podcast for her, right? And I just had to stop in the middle of it and said, my God, I'm looking at 3 future presidents for your country. You're going to have to fight it out. You know, like, I mean, it was just, and the energy it gives you is phenomenal. But to go back to the sustainability part, like the thing for me is this, is, you know, to create a massive change, you need this massive army. And I, as a leader, try to lead by example. And there's the two ways. You can regulate and compliance, whereas you're basically taking a big stick as a leader and go, I'm going to beat you until you do it.
Yeah.
Or you kind of seed this thing in. It's the same in my company. Like I like people to behave like I behave. And so in Junkature, that's the way I show up, and that's the way I try to send those young people out into the world. So if I send 100,000, the goal is to be in every classroom in the world. That's 1 billion kids. If you send them out with those values, and the value is simple, just value nature. You don't need to go into all of this rules. Like the SDGs are there, and they all have to relate something that they do back to that. So it does give them an education that's deep. But ultimately, the one value is value nature, which means value ourselves, value our planet, value. That's basically it. That's the message for me.
Oh yeah. So cause for hope. All the students that I meet are super passionate and excited and want to make a difference. Challenge. They become, you know, ESG bean counters when they get into jobs. A lot of times, sustainability companies or sustainability focused companies are packed with engineers, and it's endemic to engineers that they don't spend enough time with their clients. And so if they could just send some of these bright, excited students out into the field and have them meet stakeholders and help with target product profile development so that they could then bring that messaging back to the engineers who might have, you know, a comfort zone issue. I'm stereotyping. There are lots of socially gifted engineers, but there's a certain deterministic side to the engineering mindset that gets brainwashed into you as you go through your educational career. And in reality, sustainability solutions are messy. They don't fit into nice little mathematical models, and they require a lot of engagement with a lot of people. And so I think the biggest gap there, which if you allow the new graduates to fill, is that link to the market. And so it's bizarre, because just as a business person, you know, it's about making customers happy and finding the best product to meet the market needs. There's plenty of need in the market, but there's still that translational. I do a lot of life science investing. It's the same thing in life sciences. How do you take a good science from a great university and convert it into a good product in a complex regulatory environment, which sustainability is, and in a world where expertise doesn't matter as much anymore, you know, where it should be a really flat organization, let ChatGPT do a lot of the work for you, whatever your favorite AI is. And so there just needs to be a little bit more of allowing the youth to be unleashed And I think that is organization, one of the biggest challenges I see with companies and complaints that I see from former students who come back and say, gosh, it kind of sucks to work.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And we'll go into the impact of AI on green skills and just how it's changing things in a minute. Bill,
I'm thinking that, Sonia, you may want to respond to what Mazi just said.
Well, our surveys show us that a lot of these young students that they are really values driven, and I get a lot of hope from that. They want to be doing the right thing for themselves, for the planet, for the environment, and that gives us a lot of hope that they want to get into finance for the right reasons. They want to incorporate sustainability in how they live their lives, how they manage their portfolios, how they think about the world in general. So that is what gives me hope.
And do you think that is that continuing? It's not dropping in this current...
Not really, no.
No.
I think as far as the young generation goes, it's not changing. I think it's the older, cynical generation that may be perhaps changing their views a little bit in certain geographies.
Yeah.
But younger generation seems to be very values driven. And I do like their attitude quite a lot.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Bill, hope and challenges.
I want to go back to Greta
I'm
and
come
Richard.
to the audience next, so be prepared. And if there's no one with their hands up, I'm just going to pick on people.
So let's go back to Richard and Greta. Right? Sustainability is about right and wrong. And as we're here, people in the world are dying, and that's how they're paying for climate change. Not so many people in Palo Alto, where I'm from, but people in the world are dying, and that's how they pay for climate change. So there's a right and wrong here, and that moral lens has to be part of how we prepare our young people to understand the world. Because sustainability can be understood. We all know enough cognitive theory, but if you don't, spend a little time going down the rabbit hole of schema. So our minds make sense of phenomena by finding patterns and connecting the dots. And those schema result from you teachers and many of their other experiences, but they're shaped by you. The technical lens is a schema that Mazi just referred to, where we understand a kind of instrumental finding solutions to problems approach to climate change and sustainability. And that's a very important lens, but it's not the only one. It's not the only one. The behavioral lens, which gets to this issue of motivation from hope, what causes a talented entrepreneur to choose to go in one direction rather than another, in your case and in the case of your people, that's the behavioral lens. But we often leave out the moral lens. And the moral lens is motivating because it's about right and wrong. So my PhD students and I have been studying those three lenses over time. What's interesting is increasingly in public discourse about sustainability, people are using all three lenses at once, which is super important because if you leave out a lens, right? I mean, if you leave out the technical lens, you can't solve the problem. If you leave out the behavioral lens, you don't look at feasibility. And if you leave out the moral lens, you forget about environmental justice, and you're wrong. And a just solution is a feasible solution, right? And so you've got to have all three of those lenses in your educational portfolio if you're thinking about skilling people going forward.
And Sonia, essentially just picking up on the moral lens and you, because you do a lot of work around the qualifications and the training for investors, and you've been looking at the kind of ethical elements of those training qualifications. Perhaps you could say a little bit about that.
Well, when we speak to professionals in the industry and to our colleagues internally, there is a fair bit of consensus that what will differentiate a successful investor of the future from a not so successful one is really going to be a deep appreciation of ethical issues, especially in a world where AI is taking over so much of our lives. I mean, right now in the US, this controversy, and there's a very open public debate going on regarding AI models, regarding Anthropic, OpenAI, US Defense Department, and so many ethical issues are arising out of that. And in a way, I'm glad that that's happening because people are taking notice now Right? So far, it's like, let's just adopt AI, whatever, we'll see what happens later. There is no later. Those issues are arising now, and they are only going to be getting, a lot more of them will arise going forward. So at the Institute, we really bring everything back to our fundamental ethical principles. It's a set of principles which guides the conduct of investment professionals. And it really asks you to ask a lot of questions at every step of the way. When you are using an AI model, how you are think about the transparency, the interpretability, the explainability of the results of that AI model. Are you building in adequate guardrails, ethical guardrails in the process? Also, I think we should remember the adage that the map is not the territory. These models, this AI working, it is the map. It is not the territory. So when we are using it, we should be using it with transparency, with nuanced judgment, and we should use it to support our decisions rather than replace judgment. And Benjamin Graham, the father of value investing, said many, many decades ago, he said, financial analysis in the future, as in the past, offers numerous different roads to success. And this world that we live in, where AI is permeating so many aspects, I see none of those roads leading to success if we don't build in adequate ethical guardrails. And so that's a very core component of how we think about our offerings for professionals.
Very interesting. So actually, moral and ethical skills are really at the heart of this. Thank you to Anonymous, who has sent us a question. Our first one in. Please send some more in. We have one so far. Richard, I'm going to ask you to give your take on this, because actually, even the question is a little controversial. It says, how do you leverage the passion of young people entering the corporate world, given their potential lack of communication skills and authority?
Oh my God.
Feel free to challenge the question as well as answer it.
Yeah, big dig there. I think there's two parts to this. I feel like, one of the assumptions here is that, and this has been discussed, I guess, there's the passion of young people. I feel like as a student, there's actually widespread apathy among certain corners of campus about climate issues. I think that me, myself, being someone who is pretty involved in environmental issues on campus, I'm in a bit of an echo chamber where everyone else is also passionate about the same thing. I have roommates who are in computer science and electrical engineering, and they rarely think about environmental issues. And a lot of the way that our curriculum is designed funnels students into really distinct paths. For example, my roommates, they recently mentioned, I don't want to be taking a jab at them here, but they said that it's been a while that they had to write any humanities related essay, and they kind of had lost the skills since they last did it in high school. And so that's just an example of I feel like part of how the system school-wise is structured as undergraduates, a lot of our last exposures to environmental concepts came in high school or middle school, like biology or earlier. And so I feel like the passion assumption there is something I dispute, but I think that people who are passionate, we would definitely do great by leveraging that. I think that now I have to address the second.
I think you're already just refuting it by your very presence on this stage.
Oh, thank you. That's very nice. But I can see where they're coming from, in terms of if they think that Gen Z always being on their phones and not getting out in the real world and not really having that interaction causes them to not have communication skills. I think that's actually I can see it being a very prominent issue because especially with a lot of classes in my school specifically as well being taught, you could some classes are totally recorded. You can totally just do school aside from exams from the comfort of your bedroom. You don't have to go to class. There's no attendance or anything for some courses. So that's definitely something. And I feel like the activities that I partake in force me, I'm forcing myself to go out of my bubble and kind of engage with people and do public speaking or whatever like this. But that's definitely a problem. And I think that's something that
young people now have bigger ways to communicate than they ever did. Like, I mean, the phone and social media, like, their voices are carried globally and can do. So, I mean, I never saw this problem, but I remember this story with one of the top 4 companies, one of my partners in Kouture, and they had a new partner conference, so 1,000 people in the room, the latest new round of partners, and they asked us to bring in some of our young kids. So I remember this young girl, Maha, from Pakistan. She was 16 years old, took to the stage, and the lead partner for consumer for this organization said, I want you to welcome on stage Maha, and I want you guys really to listen to her. This is the voice of the future, blah, 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 blah. And I remember, I would not have answered at 16 what she did. So she basically came to the stage, and then she turned around and she just said to him, I need to correct you. Right? And I'm like, well, what are you doing? This is the mistake that every adult makes. We're not the voice of the future. We're the voice of now. And while we don't have the resources, we have some incredible ideas. You guys have the resources. Imagine the power if we put those two things together. We have the ability to turn impossible to possible. We have the sight to see it. You have the means. It was just marrying those things. And it takes courage on the other side to go, what would it be like? Like, for example, in one of my other companies at the moment, we created a tomorrow team. So there's 4 people in that team. They're 21 years old. They have no idea of my business at all, really. But the idea is to bring in this passion and they can communicate, trust me, right?
Yeah. They
can communicate better than a lot of, like, we've hangovers from when we were kids, right? Like, otherwise we wouldn't need therapy, right? At the end of the day, that they can communicate extremely powerfully and passionately, and they have a lot to give. The thing is us having the courage to listen to them.
I'm inspired hearing what you're saying, Troy, and I see the second question, so I'm going to combine them if that's okay.
Great, please do, and read the question out.
If you look at the second question, asks about whether folks who run organizations have sufficient knowledge to act on sustainability, similar to what young folks have. But I want to bring that back to the passion issue in the first question, because you don't leverage passion. You can contain it, or you can set it free. So I'm not quite sure what leveraging passion would look like, but you set it free. And the second question is about status quo bias. So it's not an information problem. It's a problem of perspective, that the people of the 20th century see the world through the lens of the 20th century, getting back to our cognitive schema. So they understand the world according to the status quo. And we know that people who view the world through the lens of the status quo cannot understand amazing new changes when they come along. They look threatening or infeasible or impractical or foreign.
Or impossible.
Young people have the beauty of being deviant because they don't own the status quo. So they deviate from it. And that sometimes looks incredibly foolish, and it sometimes looks incredibly genius. Foolishness is the price of genius. If we free up their passion, they will do all sorts of ridiculous things, and in the process, they will change away from the status quo. We know we need to change away from the status quo. The concern I have when I see my students go out into the world is that the world will do a good job of confining their passion to remain acceptable and appropriate through the eyes of the status quo. The last thing I say to them by the time they leave my class is that the organizations you operate in give you an opportunity to direct your passion to change the world. The organization is kind of the Goldilocks zone, right? Because you can change your own life, but it is just one. And it's going to be hard for you to get everybody else to act differently if you don't just change your own life. And you'd like to change everything, but you're not going to have control of the Leviathan. But your organization is a place where you can make a difference, unless the organization confines you to the status quo. So don't go to an organization that does that. Don't create an organization that does that. And by the way, those organizations that are wed to the status quo, good news, they will die. And the people who were raised in the status quo of the 20th century, we will die. And that will free them up to be deviants and create a world, well, they will be known as the greatest generation.
But can I just come in? It's not related to this, it's in a way, but my organization was built out of young people. And then, when you scale, you have to get experience. And I remember we hired experience, and I remember the one line that person used to use all the time was, "That's not the way the industry works." So we stopped innovating in the company.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to figure out what's going on here. Like, we were doubling every year, and then we started to plateau. Then I realized, even myself, when I was stopped speaking up about things, because it was just this one line from somebody who had the industry experience saying to the rest of us, "That's not the way the industry works." And so it is difficult to get that in, but it's courage. For me, it's people having courage to go, I'm going to listen to the Richards of the world and these crazy, as we call them, young people.
And that sense of possibility, it's hanging on to that sense of possibility of things can be different. I love that everyone sent in loads of questions with only about 4 minutes to go. So I'm going to ask the panel to wrap up with the question that's at the top of our list here, which I think is a great one to end on. So with all the changes coming up with AI, global conflicts, polarization, climate inaction, etc., what is the one thing that gives you hope for the next generation? And I guess maybe to build on that, what's the one commitment you'd like to see from yourself and the room to make it a reality? Richard, do you want to kick off?
Go
backwards down the line.
Yeah, well, this is a hard one. I can say for myself, I think one thing that gives me hope for, that's a great question. I think just having that intrinsic passion and not losing the motivation to do things.
Thank you.
I think I would like people to just become more aware, get out of their comfort zones. And recently I watched David Attenborough's documentary Ocean. And I urge everyone in this room to watch that documentary, because we talk so much about deforestation, reforestation, and of course we should focus on the forests, but I don't think we think enough about the oceans. They are the world's largest carbon sink, but they can do their job properly only when there is abundance of diversity of marine life there. And in this documentary, they show something called bottom trawling, where you use those heavy metallic fishing nets to basically scrape the bottom. I urge everyone to, once you see it, you can't unsee it. It gave me sleepless nights watching that. It just destroys that whole ecosystem, the marine life and the coral reefs. And it's just so bad for our environment. So we should just continuously look to update our knowledge, watch stuff like that, so that we get more involved. And like I said, something like this, now I can't stop thinking about oceans. Earlier, even I didn't pay much attention to that. So
interesting. Mazi?
All these horrible things that you describe here are very bad and affecting some people on some parts of the world, but it's a bit of a fog, and the machine is still moving forward in the right direction. I really feel that. Bill and I just taught a course down in Panama at the Latin America Parliament, and it was attended by the heads of parliament from all 23 countries that are in that parliament. There wasn't one representative. These are like what would be the equivalent of like the Speaker of the House in the United States. There wasn't one speaker who didn't talk about, and this was an economic forum. It was World Economic Forum, Latin America and Caribbean. There wasn't one of them that didn't speak about biodiversity, environmental issues, sustainability. Nobody prompted them to do this. This was not an environmental conference. So Latin America didn't seem to get the memo, that we're not talking, that, it's taboo to talk about green. I think it's exaggerated greatly that we're going backwards. I feel like everything's moving forward, full steam ahead, little speed bumps along the way, but it's all going to be fine.
Great.
I love that, Mazi. So let me just write on top of that and say, ignore the hype. I just finished an analysis of the hype cycle, looking at the public discourse on terms that are synonymous with sustainability since 1960, from 1960 to the present. And it's an incredible hype cycle. We hit our all-time low in the English-speaking world in 1980. It would have been the Reagan administration when James Watt, back then. We're back close to that now. 3 years ago, we were at our all-time high. 3 years before that, we were almost at our all-time low. The hype cycle keeps hyping. Ignore the hype cycle. If you pay attention to the hype cycle, if you look at the hype, you are splashing about on the surface of the sea of life. Pay more attention to the deep currents, and those are all going in the direction of change. And if you go there, you end your life having made a difference. You pay attention to the hype, you're constantly vacillating, and you make no difference.
Yeah.
Sure.
And Troy?
Well, I've had
final
to
words?
think about it all because it's a difficult question to answer.
Yeah.
But the one thing for me that stood out, the thing that stands out, or the answer that came to me was females. And I think like one of the things in Kouture, like with 90% of the participants are young females. And I think, you know, in the next 10 to 15 years, we're going to see this massive transfer of wealth too, to females. There's trillions of dollars going to move from men to women. And also is that the thing that I see too is that, you know, Southeast Asia, Nigeria, countries like Nigeria, 70% of the population under 30, these young females getting a voice, getting platforms, they're going to make a huge difference. I think that the change from, you know, I was at one of these events and it was Jeff Bezos was talking, right? And Mahina Mohammed got up to speak after it. And her point was, we have a man-made problem. We need women to solve it. We all know that,
Amen
right?
to that. Well, thank you so much to all my panelists.
That's good.
This afternoon. That's been an absolutely fascinating conversation. Do continue the conversations afterwards.